Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where today's most exciting solopreneurs share their startup stories. They also deliver tangible strategies that they would implement personally if starting their business over today. Each episode is a startup masterclass. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Amy Smith. Amy, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
I would love for you to share a little bit about Amy Smith to our Rising Tide listeners.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you can probably tell from the accent, I'm from Australia, so from the great land down under in Sydney, and have grown up there, but I've been an avid traveller through my career as well. So I spent a lot of time living in Canada and then also living in the UK and working over there. But back here in Sydney, and entrepreneur, business owner. So that's, I guess, me in a nutshell. But, I've had, university education, all those sorts of things. But I'm kind of on the opinion now that maybe not, that didn't serve me as best as we could have. So I'm sure we can get stuck into that now that I've done the entrepreneur track rather than the corporate track. So, yeah.
So walk us like from the time that you got out of university, and so what was kind of the first step after university, and what was your major? Or what was your specialization?
Majored in human resource management, a little bit of marketing as well, and then strategic management and leadership. So it was a commerce degree that I did, and I wasn't a numbers girl, so I went straight into more of the people side of things, and the communication side of things is where I fell into, which was great. And then when I graduated from uni, I thought, most of my, fellow students were heading off to some graduate roles, and I kind of decided that I wanted a little break. So I headed off to Canada and worked in the snow for a few months, which was awesome fun. So that was kind of like my break from after, the hard slog of university or college. Just
now, was this like in Alberta? Is this where you were in that area, like around Banff or Calgary, or?
I was in Whistler, which is,
okay.
They call it Wistralia because there's actually more Australians than Canadians I work.
Yeah.
But that was great fun, and sort of kicked off my career from there.
Were you working in a ski slope there? I mean, in HR, or were you working? I mean, were the two things connected, or you just went there and just say, I can just get a job and rent skis or whatever that was?
Yeah. Well, snowboarding was front of mind. That was probably my first and foremost goal at the time, to snowboard on some decent snow, because we don't get that much great snow over here sometimes in Australia. And I was working at the Fairmont hotels over there. So I actually had a variety of different roles, from housekeeping right through to some admin, right through to some junior HR roles over there as well, in amongst that time. So it was actually really cool to learn the inside out of how a hotel works and how a hotel runs. So that was a really, really cool experience, and learned a lot, from the management side of things moving forward in my career.
Was that pretty easy to move from like one commonwealth territory to another, like from Australia to New Zealand or Australia to Canada, or is that pretty easy for members of the Commonwealth?
Yeah, like for Australians it is. Like you have to go through the process of applying for your visa and things. And I was pretty, I knew kind of leading up to the end of uni, that's what I wanted to do. So at the time I was on forums, I was on blogs, I was like working out how everyone else did this. And then I sort of, went through the process. But I had a Skype interview with the Fairmont hotels when I was still over here. And I think it worked out to be about 3 a.m. for me over here, which wasn't the best time. But, I still got dressed up as I would for a normal interview and did that. And that was actually the feedback that I got, was a lot of people weren't taking it so seriously because, again, a few years ago, video interviews weren't still that common. Now we're on video all of the time. But I think a few years ago, people didn't really know how to do video interviews that well. So one of the feedbacks that I actually had was that I was one of the only ones that, actually got out of their pajamas, I'd say.
Wow. Yeah, they were actually vertical. They weren't laying in their bed looking at the Skype on their computer. But so walk us through the kind of the timeline from, the working at Whistler to what you do today. Just kind of walk us through that transition period.
Yeah, absolutely. So, after my 6 months of fun in the snow, I kind of said, all right, now's time to get onto my career. Now it's time to get back on track. and came back to Sydney and started working recruitment. So that was working for an agency in recruitment in the technology space. So I was recruiting, you know, lots of different people, from developers to scrum masters to, you know, solution architects, all of the above in technology. And that was really fun because that was a great way to learn. I was able to sort of utilize, I guess, my people skills in that as a first role, and really sort of learn the inside out of how recruitment operates, and started on LinkedIn at that time as well. So I was really navigating that platform in the early days, and really starting to connect with people through that. And then that was a contract role to get me started, and I had the choice sort of afterwards. They wanted to extend me in that role, and I still had that travel bug within me that didn't go away. And in that time, I'd actually applied to get my visa for the UK and headed over to the UK, and had a job lined up before I went over there as well. So I actually, that was probably my first aha moment with LinkedIn, was getting a job in the UK before I'd even left Sydney as well, and had a job, executive recruitment role in the private equity space over there lined up, ready to go. So again, I just, you know, packed up my backpack and went around Europe for a little while, and then landed in London. And then I was over there working for a couple of years, and I had a variety of different roles there. A lot to do, some consulting with HSBC, which was great, and working with them on their staffing strategies and their branches. And then, you know, was able to really, work over there for a couple of years, get some great international experience, and then headed back home to Sydney.
So I see a pattern here. You leave Australia, you work a while, then you return. It's like isn't that the kind of the boomerang effect or something like that?
Yeah, it's that damn travel bug.
Absolutely. You stay there for a little while, then you get this kind of this wanderlust again, and you're back on the road. So what happened when you came back to Australia? Did you go back into HR at that time, or back into like a contract role, or had a job lined up?
Yeah, so I came back, and then I was on the job hunt again, and within a couple of weeks I was in a HR management role with the YMCA. So that was awesome, because that was in that sports and recreations industry. Really, really cool community, you know, feel for the place as well. So that was awesome. I ran a few centres here in Sydney, in the city. I had a team of, you know, we probably had around 650 staff that I was managing across multiple centres. So it was quite a great role in terms of just the diversity of people you'd get to meet, and then also the diversity of the role too. And then through that process, you know, I was there, and I was working there. I think I'd been there probably about a year and a half. And then we had a takeover happen. So I had to make myself and everyone else redundant, which was not the most fun experience to go through. But a really, really great learning curve for me, I guess, really early in my career, to have gone through that kind of, you know, change management process, and, you know, transition into the new employer that had come in, taken over the sites. And then after a while, I was out again.
Did you say YMCA was subject to a takeover?
Yeah, so we had YMCA New South Wales is kind of a separate entity down here. And so we have, it was not the company itself, I should clarify that. It's not the company itself, but it's more so the sites that we manage. So the sites that we were managing around Sydney were taken over by another provider. So, you know, for us, that was a big takeover, but not so much like a company. You know, the company's still alive and well, that's still operating, but it was just you know, we had 5 or 6 sites in our sort of zone or area. Okay.
These were more location based.
Location
based.
Like
the buildings themselves. Yeah. So because I was trying to get my head around this, you know, YMCA was subject to takeover. Aren't they like a non-profit, like globally or something like that?
Sorry, I should have
clarified. I want a block away from our house or So
in our little internal world at the time, it was devastating. But yeah.
Oh, I mean, 600 people that you have to make redundant. That is devastating at any time. And I'm kind of curious. So, were the facilities were taken over, but for the same purpose? I mean, were they still used as kind of gym or recreation centers?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, so it was just everything, the new contracts were up for a tender, and, we weren't able to get that tender. And the business at the time was going down another strategic direction in terms of focusing on more regional areas. So with the combination of all of that, it just kind of imploded on us. But, it was a great experience. There's still, a lot of great people like working there through head office and all the rest of it that are still great, and we have good relationships with them as well. It was just one of those things that happens, right? It's just business and it's careers, and now it's going to happen to people more than ever. I'm sure people now are experiencing things they never thought would happen in their careers. So, it was a really good early lesson for me to really think about the concept of job security. Because in my mind, that was a solid job and I would have that for a few years, but it wasn't to be. So, yeah.
I'm interested. I warned you in the prep materials that I may chase a rabbit here or two, because what you just said was really interesting, and it brought a question to my mind. Do you think that I guess the transition being made redundant, eventually if you had to make everyone else redundant, your job becomes redundant as well, because there's no one left to manage. But do you think that was a spark that led you to kind of start your own thing? Was just that when you was something broken in you a little bit, the security, or I don't know really how to phrase it. You kind of know where I'm getting at here.
Yeah. I think for me, I've always had an entrepreneurial streak in me since a young age. So I actually started my first business when I was 12, which is kind of strange for a lot of people, but I used to make handmade bags. Like I would sew my own bags out of materials, and my family used to donate like all of their old jeans to me. I'd cut off the legs and then I'd sew up and turn it into a bag and sell them at markets and at school. And so that was kind of in me from a young age to sort of do things that are a little bit different and out of the box, and ways to make money that when I couldn't actually work for someone else, I was like, how do I make money? So that was kind of in me from a very young age. And I think when this happened, it did sort of shift something in me to think, okay, well, nothing is forever. So when I'm looking at careers, and I think that's something that's quite common amongst a lot of millennials, if I'm to put a bracket around it, is that nothing is forever these days, and there's the ideal that people used to hold around their careers of going to work for one company, moving through that company, and I guess essentially growing up within that company, and then retiring with a gold watch at the end of it. Like those days are long gone. So I think a lot of people, particularly millennials and Gen Zs, they do have a shorter tenure in mind in their heads, and it can be from their own perspective, but they also can see the world around us and how fast things move and how quickly things can shift as well. So yeah, I do think it was a combination of me having already an entrepreneurial streak in me, and knowing that eventually I will do something on my own. And then, the other side of things where I had that personal experience of having to really, go through that redundancy process.
So speaking of starting something on your own, so what has this led to? What did you launch and kind of create?
Yeah. So I guess my next role after being made redundant was I started working for a leadership company, executive coaching company. And so I was a part of working within the head office there. I was a part of a global network of 16,000 executives across 16 countries. And, my role there was really helping ex-CEOs that had run companies of sort of anywhere between 5 to 100 mil. And they'd kind of hit a point in their life where they're like, I'm not ready to retire, but I also want to mentor and, leverage my skills for other business owners out there. And so I would sort of help them, make that transition and launch their own executive coaching businesses within that model of the workplace I was in.
Okay.
And so from there, I got thrown into the world of coaching, got thrown into the world of leadership development. I was working with a lot of really intelligent business owners. I was sitting around boardroom tables with people that had, tons of experience in business, running massive, massive companies around the world. And so that was a massive trigger and a shift for me to think, well, I should be doing something on my own now. And so, after I launched my own consulting and coaching business, after I'd finished up there, and I made that transition where I started it coaching people as a bit of a side hustle after when I was still working there. I dropped down my role to part-time. Thankfully, I had an amazing CEO who was so supportive of me. I was very transparent with her when I got to that point of where I was at. And she was amazingly supportive of me to make that transition into my own business. And so I was very, very lucky at the time to have that. And so then I was able to jump into my own thing full time. And it was a very smooth transition.
Was there a bit of a conflict of interest at that time with your kind of your day gig and your side gig going on at the same time? Were they too close to be in the same space or kind of to do it on a prolonged basis?
Yeah, look, at the time it wasn't, because I was coaching people that weren't, I guess, in the market for the business that I was in. So I started off coaching. I was approached by a lot of, I guess, people early in their careers. So they were graduates finishing uni, people that were sort of mid-level in their careers and looking to step up into leadership roles. And the business I was working for focused on the other side of the spectrum, where they would only be coaching people that were running companies that were 5 million in turnover or more. So it was more sort of the people in their careers that I was focused on, whereas the business I was working for was coaching more business owners and executive directors at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So what year was this that you started that you transitioned on your own?
Yeah, so this would have been the start of 2018. Sort of the early months of that year, first 6 months of that year was that sort of transition phase. So I guess it's been, just on a couple of years now, or a year and a half, where I've been, out on my own, which is scary to think about. Time flies, doesn't it?
It does. What was the window of time where you were part-time versus when you walked out the door completely?
Well, I guess I backed myself and made the jump a little earlier than what other people may have, in that, I was kind of, a lot of people I speak to now that sort of build it up into a side hustle will build up their income to a point where it kind of takes over their salary and then goes.
Yeah.
So I'd actually been working probably part-time for about 3 months before I decided to make the jump. And I had yet replaced my, full-time salary, but I had enough confidence in the business to know that if I had opened up this extra few hours a week, that I could really use that to really grow and grow fast. So that's sort of the judgment call that I made at the time.
Right.
And it's different for everyone. Everyone's in different financial situations, and I don't have kids. That was a big part for me, was that I know a lot of people, if you're starting a business with kids, it's extra pressure, right? It's a lot of things you've got to work out. So, for me at the time, I was thinking, I had a high tolerance for risk, and I'm like, here we go, let's go.
I love that. And that's exactly, that everything that you're describing is kind of the genetics of a true risk-taking entrepreneur. But I'm calculated risk. This had a plan, this had a strategy behind it, for you to make that decision. But so you and I are going to step on a lift. We're going to go up 10 floors. You got 45 seconds to kind of give me your elevator pitch. I'm potentially an ideal client. So tell me about Align Tribe.
Oh, pressure's on.
You can handle it.
No, that's great. So, my business is Align Tribe. So I help executive leaders and organizations really future-proof themselves in the rapid changing world of work. So, really taking people from the offline to online, whether that be, an executive who has had their career their whole lives and then, doesn't have that digital presence or doesn't have that ability, I guess, to continually remain relevant as we move forward in the future world of work. And for organizations as well, it's looking at their systems, processes and people to look at how they can best adapt to this new world as well. And a lot of that involves helping their millennial leaders as well. We've got a lot of millennials now. Will be 75% of millennials will be in the workforce globally it'll make up the 75% of the global workforce by 2025. So wow. I think a lot of, millennials are now stepping up into those executive positions, and they're leading and managing a lot differently to previous generations. So I kind of help bridge that gap.
The old boomers like myself, we better get ready, huh? The millennials.
Not like that at all. Everyone has so many great skills and experience to bring. It's just about how we can all meet in the middle and leverage off one another.
I'm actually a true millennial. I'm just in a boomer suit. You know, it's I believe millennial. I act like
I
a
believe you,
millennial, so
Kevin.
no doubt about it. So I'm curious, how do you, if I'm your ideal client that you're kind of doing your pitch to, how do you measure ROI? Because it seems like it's almost like an intangible, benefit to, to do some of the services you described. And is that really one of the biggest hurdles you have to get over when you're pitching to a potential client is really showing them what's the tangible ROI to this?
Yeah, I guess, from the organizational side, if you're looking at it from a people perspective, we'd be looking at measuring your current retention rates for your staff. We'd be looking at your engagement levels with your staff. You'd be looking at your recruitment pipeline and how fast you are able to attract great talent and what that looks like. So there's some really measurable things in there that we can help sort of move the needle on in each of those different elements, depending on what your focus is on at the time. And I guess working with individuals from the executives that I work with, it's really looking about their branding and their presence online. So to be looking at, things like growing your LinkedIn network and looking at, okay, how many, connections do you have when we started working together? And then how many, new opportunities and connections do you have? If you're a business owner or you're in your own consulting firm, it's like, how many conversations have you been able to generate from, having a bigger digital presence and having those conversations online? How is that translated into sales? So there are things along the way that, it sounds quite fluffy, but when you actually look under the hood and get into it, there's a lot of like really measurable things along the way.
I want to tell our listeners, you need to follow Amy online. She is really, really good at LinkedIn and really knows her stuff, and really creates some great content. So I have truly enjoyed, seeing the things you produce, the videos you produce, and other articles that you post on there and comments you've made. So I really want to applaud your LinkedIn status and LinkedIn presence online. It really is classy. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
So I'm curious. Let's kind of bring this all to a head in the current, pandemic crisis that we're facing right now. I mean, of all people, somebody that really understands HR really feels this at a gut level. I mean, you've seen every facet of this, and you see that you can obviously have walked through the fallout of this as well. Number one, how has it affected your business? And then after that, I just kind of speak from your wisdom and experience, like you're talking to, early stage founders or people that are trying to lead their teams through this kind of malaise called, COVID-19, and just give them some helpful hints of, ways to navigate well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is unprecedented times that we're all in. And I think one thing to acknowledge is that no one expected this. No one was prepared for this. And we also don't have anyone that we can sort of lean to that has been through this, right? And can sort of, is that expert that can give us all the solutions, because the reality is that everything is still an unknown. So I guess for me personally, in my own business, of course, this has, affected my business as it has for a lot of other businesses out there, mainly because, I was doing a lot of speaking gigs and events and a lot of the consultancy side of things. Businesses are really sort of bunkering down and eliminating a lot of the expenses and other things like that, which is just a natural reaction in these times. So the sort of people-focused areas that I was in is sort of on hold at the moment. But I guess the way that I've set up my business and the way that I'm really scaling and moving my business forward is in the online space. So there's two sides to it where, now it's like just focusing on the online space. I do all my coaching online with people all over the world. And then I've got, some online programs and all those sorts of things that, are now sort of ramping up. So I think it's kind of two sides to it. I'm also very grateful and thankful that I don't own a restaurant right now, because I know there's a lot of people that are suffering more, or a gym. Yeah. So for me, I just think, look, I'm really grateful for the position I need to be online, and I can move forward from here, no problem. And I guess, for other people out there, the biggest thing is that everyone is quite, the energy is quite heavy at the moment. You'll probably feel it with your team members, and you'll feel it with everyone you speak to on the street. And so I think there's people that are really stuck in fear right now and are kind of in that scarcity mindset, which is a really, really hard thing to get out of. But I think one of the best things to do is start to look at the silver linings and start to bring the positives out in this. Because as we know that there will be opportunity after this, and it's the business owners and the leaders right now that are pivoting, that are moving fast, that are taking action, that aren't just pulling the doona over their heads, are the ones that are going to come out the other side of this stronger than ever. So I think, you know, if you are feeling that the best thing to do is just fill your head up with as much positivity as you can, switch off the news and just like keep moving forward and keep focused on what your goals are, because there will definitely be opportunities out there. You know, from a leadership point of view, like I wrote a blog recently on how leaders can really sort of manage through this time. And the 3 key things that I think are really, really helpful to remember is you have to really be real with your team in these times. You have to sort of call out the elephant in the room. Like no one, as a CEO or a leader, no one wants you to go into the room and sugarcoat things, because they know it's not true and they know what's going on. So you really just have to be vulnerable, be a little bit empathetic to where your team members are at, and just be real with them. If you don't have the answers, say that. You know, they're not going to think any less of you. In fact, you know, the CEO of Microsoft sent out a great email where it was actually sort of letting his team members know that there were times where, you know, he felt hopeless and he felt that, you know, he wasn't sure of what to do. And that actually creates a really good connection with your team members, so that on the other side of this, they have so much more respect for you.
Right.
The other couple of things to keep in mind is, you know, creating a lot of certainty for your teams, because they don't actually have certainty right now. So that might even be, if they're working remotely, it might be that you stick to the same cadence of meetings that you've had forever, because that feels normal to them. So it's kind of clinging on to as much normality as you can through this time is going to give people a lot of comfort. And also, you know, bring out the positives and the opportunities and reconnect people to your vision. And you might even have to do that for yourself as a leader. You might have to sit there and think, has my vision changed? You know, am I still, you know, passionate about what I'm doing? If not, why not? And what do I need to do to fix that? And then you need to be communicating that to your team so that they have something to latch onto to help move them through as well. So I hope that answers your question, Kevin, but I think there are a few key things that are really relevant to right now and really practical and easy to implement.
Right. Please remind me. I would love to put, because I actually read that article when you posted it on LinkedIn. Yeah. So I want to make sure that we have that link in the show notes, because I think that is so apropos for what people are facing. So I've got a follow-up question too. Just, I mean, I love the, you know, kind of the experience and the space you've come out of, or actually, you know, still in, I guess, but like the HR space, because I think you have a unique view of just like workplace. And so what do you think life is going to look like post-COVID, post-coronavirus? And just, you know, put on your futurist hat just for a second and say, okay, you know, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, this is what the landscape I think is going to look like. It's going to be different than now. Yeah.
Look, I think it will be a new normal for sure. I was actually probably around 5 weeks before all of this crisis hit. I'd caught up with a ex-colleague who was up in Brisbane, up in Australia, and we were talking about, you know, future of work and all of those sorts of things, and are robots going to steal our jobs, and all those conversations that most people have. And it was really interesting, because a lot of the things that we were talking about, what we were considering would happen in the next 5 years has now happened in a matter of 5 weeks. And so things like, you know, more frequent remote working opportunities and more flexible work. Businesses are now needing to embrace technology and really look at ways to automate things and reconstruct how people work, and maybe think around, is, you know, someone in a full-time role, is that really the best way for someone to work, or is it a job share opportunity for that particular role? Like really being able to think outside the box. I think before this, most people were just doing things because it was the way that it was always been done. And I don't think that attitude is going to serve you very well if you're moving forward in business and you want to have a really relevant business moving forward. Right. So I think we're going to see a huge level of remote opportunities and more flexible work opportunities become available, because businesses and organizations now have been just thrown into the deep end with it. And of
Yeah.
course, processes and systems and everything is going to break to start with. But as they start to build that up and they start to find solutions, there will be questions that people ask around, well, do we need to have this big 3-level office space, or do we need one level with, some meeting rooms where, we can have some meetings 1 or 2 days a week, all in person, and then the other 3 days everyone works from home.
Exactly.
So there might be that sort of hybrid approach, I think, that will come into play. And I think that's really important for businesses to be thinking about, because I think your employees have adapted to working remotely. Some of them loving it, some of them hating it. Might depend if you have kids or not that are at school, that are not at school. I don't know if that plays a part.
Exactly.
But I think there's going to be a lot of people now that employees are going to come back and they're going to want more flexible remote working solutions. And I think businesses need and should be open to that.
I mean, it's interesting because I was going to kind of follow up, with the idea that, I think businesses that do not adapt to the new normal are going to be left behind. And if you're competing with another business for an employee, a potential employee, I think that they would maybe even take less at the other company if the work environment was more flexible. If they didn't have to do the commute, they didn't have to, certain hours or that type of thing. So I think you're exactly right. I think, companies are going to have to adapt to be able to compete in the marketplace, moving forward.
I was working with a large education institution, like probably about a year ago now, and there was a conversation that happened where there was a manager, and he just so happened to be a boomer. I'm not picking on boomers. He just so happened to be a boomer, and he had one of his millennial team members come to him, and he's this single guy who was 24 years old, and he asked to work remotely, and he asked to work, I think, a few days remotely. And the boomer's response at the time was that, well, you haven't really earned it, and you don't really have a valid reason to work remotely. You don't have a family, you don't have kids, what is your actual reason for requesting this? And it's really interesting because, from a millennial's point of view, they're thinking, well, I can do my job from home. It makes no difference. I'm on my laptop, whether I'm in the office or I'm at home. For his particular role, there was no requirement for meetings and things with the team. And, from the boomer's perspective, it was kind of like he was asking to have a privilege, or it was seen as a privilege, or it was like that he hadn't earned his stripes, or, all of those sorts of things that you hear, right? And I think those attitudes, have to shift in order to move forward, because they're not going to serve you any longer. And I'm not picking on boomers, because, millennials and Gen X and all the rest of it, other people can have those attitudes as well. So I think that's a general thing to be cautious of.
Oh, there's no reasons, there's no need to have any caveats or apologies, because I'm a boomer who happens to agree with you, because I think that, I can just imagine that employee, walking out of that office and immediately getting on Google and looking for another job. I mean,
he was. Yeah.
Let's find something that is a little more flexible. So, well, Amy,
absolutely.
I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat today, and I just love hearing your backstory, and I really appreciate you kind of unpacking, especially the last part about just how to navigate coronavirus and COVID-19 well, and how to lead your team well, and just the whole package today. I mean, it's just been great. I literally could ask you questions just again and again, but I do want to honor your time. But is there anything that I haven't touched on you just want to kind of wrap up with, and then maybe tell people where's the best place to connect with you online?
Yeah, well, I guess you've just sort of mentioned the key word there is online. So I think I would really encourage people, if they're not, if they don't have an online solution, or don't have their own digital presence online, it's super important. And now's the time to actually have the time to invest in it.
Right.
So that's really, really a great practical thing that you can do to help you through this time as well. And for anyone that does want to connect with me online, you can find me on LinkedIn at Amy L. Smith Coach. And you can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Amy L. Smith, and my website is alignedtribe.com.
So where did the name Aligned Tribe come from?
Great question, Kevin. I am cautious to admit that a couple of wines were involved, but I'll admit that. Look, for me, it's about bringing people together, and it's about, building that tribe within your organization, no matter of people's backgrounds or levels of experience or age or anything like that. So, you know, for me, my whole thing from working from the HR point of view is, you know, how can we build up the people component of this business to really align it to the business strategy and really make sure that everyone's on the same page and moving forward to the one direction. So, you know, that's where sort of, I guess, those play on words, the Align Tribe, came from. But yeah, it was a bit of brainstorming with a couple of wines and then looking on the domain names to see what was taken and what wasn't. And
That's
all
right.
those fun things to do as a startup entrepreneur. So
Right.
yeah.
What .com we could get, because, you know, we don't want a .net or a .org, that's for sure.
That's
So,
exactly right. Yeah.
you know, Simon Sinek and Seth Godin would be very proud of your name, though, because it's like this perfect merger of their kind of their two philosophies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, Amy, thank you again for just taking the time today and just, you know, sharing your experience. And I love the whole ethos behind, you know, what you've built here. And it just fits so well with what we're trying to build here at Rising Tide. And I just thank you for just playing your part and helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Amy, have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Another episode in the books. We hope you heard some great takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on iTunes and YouTube. As always, thanks for listening to Rising Tide.